Hey, Fabrice, great to have you back on the show. I have always enjoyed what you write about. You spark ideas, you share a lot of information. And in one of your recent posts, you talked about Fabrice AI. And boy, did that get my gander. So let's start with, for those who don't know you, who the heck is Fabrice Grinda?
Pleasure to be on the show again. A little bit of background. I guess I'm French originally, like most of the family, even though I don't sound French anymore. From Nice, came to the US for college, went to Princeton, top of my class, and then worked for McKinsey and Company for a few years. And then at the tender age of 23, I started building tech companies. And for the last 27 years I've been building and investing in tech startups. And actually, I kind of knew I wanted to do that from the get-go. Like at the age of 10, I got my first PC, was building computers, et cetera. So I built a bunch of companies. And I'll go just brief. The last most relevant one was a company called OLX, which is Le Bon Coin, if you want, for the rest of the world. It's 11,000 employees in 30 countries. It's over 300 million users a month. It's like part of the fabric of society in most of the emerging markets like Brazil and all of Eastern Europe and India, Pakistan, et cetera. And I guess, then graduated to building a venture fund called FJ Labs, where we focus on investing in and in mostly network effect and marketplace businesses. And now we have 1,100 investments in startups. We've had over 300 exits, and it's super fun and to be part of like building the world of tomorrow.
Indeed, it is. I mean, not only are you building the world of tomorrow, I feel like Fabrice, in the amount of time that I've known you, you also feel like you're developing into tomorrow, the way you are.
Well, I think most people live lives by like social norms that it's not even unclear. Well, I guess if you read Sapiens, you can come up with ideas of where they come from. But they're like, oh, I need to go to high school, then I go to college, and then I get a job, and then I get married, and I have two kids and a dog, and and then you you have your white picket fence, you want to shoot yourself, and no one actually questions. It's like, oh, it's societal expectations because your parents did that. And so you tell yourself that you need to do that versus actually going from first principles. What is it? Who is it that you are? What is it that you want to be doing? Where is it you want to be living? And how is it you want to be living? And you may not know the answer to these things, but the same way that entrepreneurs basically throw spaghetti on the wall to see what sticks until they find product market fit, you can do the same thing in your personal life, and you can try many things and approaches in terms of what works for you. And I'm not saying that the answers I found for myself are universal, that the approach I took, I think, is universal. It's just people are too kind of conservative is the right word, but like set in the ways and not willing to try to different approaches and ways of living. And I think I've been very good at that and living the life I am meant to be living and just be living my best life, being my true authentic self, which I think most people find it hard to be themselves as well for some reason. They like feel they need to hide and like especially in the this woke world where people are afraid of being canceled by and for no reason often.
Well, lots of words that are off territory. But I mean, the funny thing is, Fabrice, of course, you now have a dog and two kids.
I do, but that is by choice and through iteration. I was actually for the longest time against the idea of having kids. I was like, all my friends who have kids, they disappear as the individual, or even as a couple, they become the parents, and their life seems to have ended. And they, even though they claim that sometimes they're happy, for the most part, when I meet them, and it's extraordinarily rare. It's like every 6 weeks they're always complaining about the lack of time they have and how their kids have ended their life. But what changed my mind actually is I did in one of these probably non-traditional journeys or path, I did ayahuasca ceremony in 2018. And in said journey, my grandmother, who's had passed at that point for almost 20 years,
Mammy.
Mamie Françoise, who is the matriarch of the family and the one who's the gathering point, getting everybody together. We'd all meet around her, typically for both the summer vacations and Christmas Eve. Came to see me and she said, um, you are living your best life. You're living your life's purpose. Everything's amazing in your life. And I understand why you wouldn't want to change anything because everything's perfect. And look at all the people around you in the ceremony, and they're all like purging and having a horrible time because I think the messages they're being given probably not as delightful. That said, there are a few things at the margin that I think you could do better that you would be a net benefit of your life. Now, the reason you've been resistant is A, you don't see the benefits of having kids, and B, you understand the costs. Well, I am here to tell you that the costs are lower than you expect them to be because instead of you lead a non-traditional life, non-traditional relationship, you don't need to have a traditional parenthood. Instead of living for your kids, which has become the helicopter parent model of like these hyperactive tiger moms in New York, you can actually
Performative parents.
live often performative. Yeah, you can live with your kids. Instead of them being a substitute for your life, they can be a complement of your life. And you can take them heli skiing, and you can do all the fun adventures. So you can do all the things you have right now and have kids. And by the way, no one's articulated necessarily effectively why having kids will be amazing for you, but you like to teach, you like to speak, you get teach classes at Harvard, at Stanford, etc. You're going to actually teaching someone that you recognize yourself in is going to be even more valuable, and it's going to be a fun adventure. And by the way, you're a big kid, and so it'll give you all the excuses you need to be even more of a kid. So you should have a boy and a girl because the relationship between a father and a son and a father and a daughter is not the same, and both are enjoyable. And also having a sister will make your son a better man, and having a brother will like toughen up and make your girl into a tomboy, and she'll be super fun, and you'll love both. And she said, have the boy first, have the daughter later, have a 2.5 year age gap. And so also in that same ceremony, I got the message of if you try something really hard and it doesn't work, it's probably not meant for you, which led me to leave the Dominican Republic, where I'd been for 7 years, and moved to Turks and Caicos after a bunch of island shopping. And I also got visited by a white German Shepherd, which I didn't know existed as a dog. And the message I got there was like, look, you're a shining beacon of light in a universe of darkness, and you need an epic white dog to go along with this beautiful vision of light. And you thought through Game of Thrones, Direwolf Ghost was only CGI, but no, it's based on an actual dog, and I exist. You need to find me. And now we have her. I mean, probably she's so white she blends into the bed sheets in the back. Angel. Now it took years to put all that in place. So after that, I had to try to have kids with my partner. It didn't work. Then I had to find an egg donor that kind of looked like her, met our IQ requirements, and then I had to find the right dog breeder, etc. But here we are. I guess now 6 years later, with a 3-year-old, a 6-month-old, and a 1-year-old puppy, and life is actually amazing. And my grandmother was right. The 2 kids and the dog are amazing, done right, as a beautiful complement to an otherwise joyful life where we have a blast. And I also won the baby lottery. They're always happy. They never cry. They sleep through the night. They seem to be precocious, smart, and fun, and we have a blast. So yeah, it's been amazing.
I love it. In the funny realm of anecdotes, in my family, I'm the older brother, younger sister, 2.5 years younger than me. I have a son and then a daughter who is 2.5 years younger than her son, her brother. So somehow it feels like a natural instance. You mentioned ayahuasca, and this process of getting to know yourself. It's something that intrigues me tremendously, and I feel is one of the ills of society is how people don't know themselves. What was your process, and if to what extent psychedelics participated in helping you to get to know who you are?
I kind of felt I always knew who I was. And I was always high IQ and high energy and entrepreneurial, tech savvy, and good in school. And that was like kind of my identity growing up. The parts of my identity, which I thought about that I was wrong about, was, oh, I also thought I was shy and introverted. And ultimately realized, no, you think you're Sheldon Cooper because you're in an environment where you're not surrounded by peers, and you have no one to interact with and no one you want to be interacting with. And so you think you're shy and introverted, and also you're younger than all your peers in school. And that took longer. So the transition to becoming the person I became is actually through observation of life. And psychedelics didn't play a huge role in that. They played a role in other things, and I'll get to them in a second. When I graduated college, so top of my class, super smart, et cetera, I built a tech company then, but I didn't have employees. It was a sole proprietorship. It helped pay for college. And then all of a sudden I go to McKinsey, and despite often, and McKinsey specializes in hiring really smart, socially awkward people, so kind of my people. But despite often being the smartest guy in the room, I was the least effective because lo and behold, to succeed in life, you need emotional intelligence, oral and written communication skills, the ability to empathize with others and put yourself in their shoes, and the ability to work in teams, public speaking skills, none of which I had. And so all of a sudden I realized, okay, I need to bring these skill sets to me and see if they come to me. And the more I worked on them, the more I realized it came naturally to me. And then the next phase of the transformation was when I started at 23 in 1998 to build my first startup. Whether you want it or not, if you're a tech CEO, you have to be a salesperson. You have to be selling the press. You have to be selling employees. You have to be selling investors. You have to be selling business partners. And there is no room for being shy. And you're also going to be rejected most of the time. Most of the things you're going to try are going to fail. Most of the times you try to raise money, people say no to you. So you get over fear of rejection rather quickly. And you become rather good at repeating the story, selling yourself, selling the company, selling the vision. To the point that actually I realized I actually kind of liked it. I was really good at being, at talking to investors, talking to the press, talking to employees, talking to business partners, and it came naturally to me. And so all of a sudden, even though that adventure failed, my first company, I went from zero to hero back to zero again after the bubble burst and lost everything. And I thought, okay, maybe tech, even though I want to be a tech founder, it's probably not where I'm going to make money, but it's okay. I didn't do it for the money. I build something out of nothing. So let's go build the next company. It's going to be this niche little thing, but it's okay. It'll be fun. But then I realized, you know what? If I'm this passionate, confident extrovert in my business life, I probably am that too in my personal life. It just so happens it's never expressed itself because I assumed I was an introvert, I was shy, etc. But I'm 27, and the rest of the world seems to value these mystical, beautiful creatures that are women, and also friendships and even family relationships, none of which I've invested in. Perhaps the time has come to actually see if that personality trait that has come so naturally to me in my business life actually can express itself in my personal life. And the answer is, of course it did. And all these things ultimately came very naturally to me. And I realized how much I valued actually interpersonal relationships and friendships and relationships. And so in investing in family. The same way that I think I was very judgmental as a kid because you judge people based on the metrics by which you're good at, because it gives you value. So as a kid, if you're not high IQ, you were deemed by me worthless. And so I was very judgmental of my parents. Eventually you realize that's a value judgment. People are built the way they are, and they have their beautiful, wonderful qualities and things to bring to the table. And in fact, you want them to be different because it's that difference that allows us to have the quality of life and the diversity that we have today. And so once I started to stop judging people, and it took a long time to get there, but like to say my late 20s, and accepting them the way they are and loving them the way they are, and understanding that really the fabric of the universe is love, and just appreciate everyone for who they are and what they do and what they bring to the table, and just be kind. Change my relationships with everyone for the better. And then I became the person I was. And psychedelics didn't play any role in any of that. It was more me wanting to be the best version of myself, the most successful, perhaps, version of myself, which required evolution from being a Sheldon Cooper from the Big Bang Theory to a much more probably kind version of Tony Stark. Psychedelics came later, in what I would call probably more of a spiritual revolution in terms of like I was as a engineer, mathematician, scientist, very definitely anti-religion, definitely atheistic. But then accidentally kind of had my first psychedelic experiences where it's like, and it led to the relationship I have today, which partly led me down the path of having kids, and also led me to really having a full-on experience where I felt like I communed with the divine. And so it actually increased my open-mindedness about like the nature of reality, and understanding that perhaps, or most likely, actually, you can, this feels like it is a matrix or a simulation, and you can manifest, you can bend. Some rules can be bent and others can be broken, as
Mr. Jobs would
Morpheus
say.
tells to Neo in the Matrix. And so it's led to a and further reinforcement of like the unity and the fact that we're all connected, and like that there's love and joy, etc. Now, I'm not convinced that that message is universal, meaning I clearly get the vision in some of these psychedelic trips that there is yin and yang, there is black and white. Um, and so perhaps my perspective, because I'm an element or force of light, I see everything as love, but I'm not sure that that's the message everyone is getting. Though I do think we're all coming from the same universal source, and I feel unity of energy. I do think we are built different by design in order to create actually different experiences for each of us. So we're kind of all here to entertain each other. Is the perspective I have. I have a more thoughtful and analytical perspective on that, but we can delve into it at another time. So no, psychedelics didn't lead me to be who I am, but they've been interesting. I got into them, and it's really like intellectual curiosity. Though I think for many people, they can be a tool of self-discovery for healing trauma. Many people describe ayahuasca, or maybe a hero's journey of acid or mushrooms, as 10 years of therapy in one night. And by the way, it is that. I think it is work. You're working on yourself. Didn't feel like that to me, because the core message I got is like, you're living your best life. You're living your life's purpose. Everything's amazing. And yet you could do these things at the margin. And even though they were, quote unquote, at the margin, in a way, they were also fundamental. I have kids. I have a dog. I moved country. But the core essence of who I am and what I do hasn't changed.
Well, somehow, nonetheless, you had that spiritual element and that connection with the universe and that universality, which I'm glad to say doesn't sound like a woke statement of we all are one, we love everybody, because that's nonsense. But I'm curious in terms of what you read, because obviously you read a lot of science fiction. I know that, and a lot, you read a lot voraciously. I'm wondering, in the realm of nonfiction, do you read people like Jonathan Haidt or other people, or maybe Sam Harris? Do you listen to his? What stimulates you in terms of exploring the outer bounds of your intellect?
On the nonfiction side, I avoid what I would consider to be business books like the plague. I find that they have one idea just repeated ad nauseum throughout the course of the book, and they're not. I mean, if you do, and can they be useful in some circumstances? Yes, but do you actually need a book over to read some of them? I'm not so sure. You can probably summarize the 4-hour work week or Nudge or any of these very succinctly in terms of like what are the best practices. But I do read a lot, kind of everything. Things that fascinate me or interest me. So history of humanity, kind of like Sapiens type books.
Yuval Harari.
I love really well written books. So Bill Bryson, which kind of also falls in, it could be history of science, like a short story of nearly everything. It's definitely not short. And it's really only the history of science and the men and women behind the science. But Bill Bryson read large. But love Alan Watts, love Sam Harris, love, very white Aldous Huxley, right? The doors of perception, our perception. We give down that path. The love biographies of the people that I find relevant to me. So Augustus, or Octavian, if you want, Alexander Hamilton. So Ron Chernow, Walter Isaacson. But overall, I'd say nonfiction is probably, look, I read probably 50 to 100 books a year, and nonfiction is probably a third of that. But I read fiction and nonfiction for the same objective, like curiosity and entertainment. I'm not trying to get anything out of it. I read it for the pleasure of reading. Like one of the most thoughtful philosophical books that I've read, or actually I've heard. I listened to an audible. I usually read. I read faster than I listen to, and I hate listening and accelerated. It was actually Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey.
Oh, yeah.
And Green Light, you would think, he's an actor. What level of insight could he have? But the combination of his like beautiful drawl and actually very clairvoyant perspective on like what is it to lead a meaningful, beautiful life, full of green lights, actually made a lot of sense. So yeah, I guess far and wide in range. And same thing in the fiction is like every type of sci-fi you can imagine, from like just entertaining to hard sci-fi to thrillers to fantasy, to you name it. So I read kind of everything. My only requirement is that it be good, and good. Typically, I would say if it's 4.5 or more on Goodreads and or Amazon reviews by the public, not by the critics, it is going to be good. Kind of like my same thing. I don't buy. I don't like my. I don't like what I don't agree with the critics often, because they will give merit to things on artistic merits, or like they'll see a movie and it's like, oh,
The
the
cinematography was so great.
cinematography was groundbreaking, but if it's like boring like hell, it is not going to appeal to me. So a surefire way to know that I'm not going to like a movie or a TV show is if the critic reviews are high and the public reviews are low. Clearly, I'm a product. I'm a man of the masses, a man of the people, because I agree with the people. And I want like 90% plus Rotten Tomatoes, like 8.0 or more on IMDb for me to consume, TV or movie media or content, for instance.
Well,
Public.
of course, as a filmmaker myself and a nonfiction writer, I'm thinking about all the freaking stars or not I have on my books. So you being a guy with a high IQ, I've always respected your intelligence. And as such, you always bring very strong reasoning to everything. And one would imagine that you would have to believe that reason and intellect is a guiding principle. Yet a book I just read called The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt, who wrote the other great book called The Coddling of the American Mind, he talks about how it's not about reason. Reason is just a sort of an internal lawyer to justify everything we do. The big thing that drives everything about us isn't just emotion, it's intuition. And this is sort of a very vague concept, but it seems to be much more the driving force of everything we do. And I was wondering to what extent that relates to you, or how that resonates with you.
The idea resonates a lot because I think it's clearly demonstrable fact. If you want to convince someone, using facts and logic and reason does not work. You clearly need to appeal to their intuition, to their emotions, and I think something Danny Kahneman, who won the Nobel in economics for what he wrote out in his book, Think Fast, Slow, points out is like people have immediate responses from their autonomic nervous system, which are driven by intuition, emotion, whatever you want to call it. And changing their perspective from that is hard. You need to force them to slow down and look at the data, et cetera. And for the most part, it is not compelling or convincing to people. So absolutely. The best way to engage with people to convince them of anything is emotionally and intuitively. Even though my mind, I feel, is driven by logic and reason as an engineer mathematician myself. And so it actually took a fair amount of effort to change the communication style and not just like bombard people with like data and statistics and charts, et cetera, in order to have an engaged conversation, because I know it's not the most effective way to get across to people.
Yeah, well, as you said, facts don't sell. And you presumably went through a lot of that in your work as you were selling yourself, your businesses, ideas. All right, so let's talk about FJ Labs. You've got these huge number of startups you're investing in. You're managing so many businesses and startups. You're in touch with so the frontier of what's going on. And I do want to get into the Fabrice AI, which is the reason why I really picked this up. But how often is AI a part of, it has to be a part of, or should not be a part of any of the initiatives you're investing in?
So every single company we invest in uses AI in some way, shape, or form, right? Like we are the early adopters. Right? I often describe VCs and founders as like people who live in the future. We're inventing and building and adopting the things that other people will adopt in the future as it becomes more common, mass market, easier to use, and cheaper. And AI is going to transform our lives in a more meaningful way than anyone can anticipate today, but it's also going to take longer than anyone can expects it to be. So what happens with all these new technologies when they become available, they become overhyped. There is a kind of a bubble of hope and excitement and things. People expect that everything will transform in the next few years. Then they disappoint inevitably, and then ultimately transform our lives and societies way more than we expect. And that was true of everything from electricity to the car to planes to the radio to TV and now to the internet. I mean, in the ideas of the late 90s, pets.com, eToys, Webvan were all viable. I mean, not then. The business models didn't exist. There were not enough users. There was no GPS for doing like delivery for Cosmo or whatever, but the ideas were funnily good. It's just the infrastructure to support them was not there. And they all became viable 20 years later. And now you have Chewy inside of pets.com, which is a multi-billion-dollar company. You have Instacart in the grocery side, et cetera. AI is probably living in a similar moment. Venture investing peaked at around 200 billion a quarter in Q4 of 2021. And it's now down to like 60, 70 billion a quarter. So it's down like 66%, basically 75% peak to trough. But actually AI investing has exploded completely. And people are investing in AI companies that I find are not that compelling. Like most of them were like co-pilots or non-differentiated companies. Everyone was like saying, I'm building an AI company, and it's basically using a non-proprietary data model or LLM on non-proprietary data with no business model, and they're raising it in the same valuations. And it's going to lead, I think, to many of these companies failing to find business models. And there's too many chasing the same ideas, and many of them are features rather than actual companies. And as a result, ChatGPT or OpenAI can just add them to what they're doing and probably eliminate many of these companies kind of automatically. Not to say they're not going to be verticals and winners, et cetera. So specific AI companies that we invest in has been far and few between. We only invest in vertical AI applications on proprietary data sets in categories where there's a proven business model. So we're investors in a company called Numerai, which is basically a stock market prediction model where people upload their models. Obviously, you need to be a kind of a mathematician to even participate. And then they all fight it out. And the most successful ones are invested in. And then the part of the proceeds are returned to the people who built the models. And AI there obviously plays a huge role. We're investors in a company called Photo Room, which uses AI to clean the background of images to increase the sell-through rate in marketplaces. Of course, something near and dear to our hearts. So the company, I think, is doing like 80 million in revenues and crushing it. And it's not only remove the background, it might be put the best background and increase the sell-through rate based on the category and the item you're selling. Also, you need to realize incumbents have a pretty big advantage in AI, or should have, because they have all the data. And that's why if you look at the publicly traded companies, the Googles and Facebooks and Amazons, the combination of their data centers and the data they have increased their market capitalization dramatically. But it's also true in verticals. So for instance, we're investors in Rebag, which is a handbag marketplace. They have all the data on handbag transactions. And they've created this AI called Claire. You take a few photos of your handbag. It'll tell you the model, the year, the condition, whether it's fake or not. It will write up the title, the description, set up the price, and it's sold in 5 minutes. Much better experience than you can imagine having on a Le Bon Coin, Craigslist, or eBay. So specific AI companies, we haven't invested in many because we felt that valuations are too high. The approaches were not differentiated enough. We've done a few verticals, giving you a few, but we've done many more. We've done some in defense, et cetera. But every single company we invest in uses AI. Everyone is using AI to improve its customer service responses. Everyone's using AI to improve your sales team. And in fact, there's a company called People.ai. When you implement it, you turn your mediocre or average salespeople to be almost as effective as the best salespeople. um, everyone's using AI to code more effectively. And so and it's the same thing. All your best developers become way more productive, and even your average developers become better. And so it's lowering costs, it's increasing speed at which you can deploy products. And so every single company we invest in, I would describe as using AI, but they would not necessarily describe themselves as AI companies. If they're a marketplace for petrochemicals, they use AI, but they're not an AI company. They're really a marketplace for petrochemicals. And so probably that's the intersection. Now, it will transform our lives in ways that we can't begin to fathom once it starts seeping into the largest components of GDP. Now, if you look at the economy today, most of GDP is the government, 30 to 45% of GDP, or 57% in France, if you want, depending on where you are. So before government starts implementing AI effectively to lower costs and increase efficiency, I think it'll be a long time, if only because of a backlash from like the public sector unions whose jobs would be threatened, and large enterprise. But again, today AI has issues, right? You have hallucinations where it literally makes shit up. And so if I'm a healthcare processor, am I getting, Mercer, are they going to be using AI to be doing claims processing on the medical side? Probably not anytime soon, because they don't want to get sued for getting it wrong. Now, will it happen in 10, 15, 20 years? And when it does happen, will it lead to an extraordinary productivity revolution? Absolutely. But I do think it'll be more transformational than people expect, but it'll also take a lot longer than people expect, which is kind of has been true for most technologies. But AI is here to stay, and everything we do is AI. Now, as I said, all of our startups are early adopters, because if we screw up, it's not a big deal. If instead of selling you the very best whatever widget, I sold you a slightly different one, it was wrong, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. We're not like mission critical.
One of the things that's funny about this conversation is you mentioned hallucinations. That's the second time we've gone into hallucinations. I always like the idea. And in my mind, I tend to believe that whether it's psychedelics or AI, we tend to hold it to a higher standard than we hold ourselves. And we like to quote the time the guy who took LSD and jumped off a building 15 years ago. Oh, well, look at that. We shouldn't do LSD. Oh, look, there's an LLM that hallucinated. Oh, well, we shouldn't use it because it's not perfect. And yet, I mean, in both cases, psychedelics and AI, we've got amazing opportunities.
Oh, for sure. Look, the thing of self-driving, people are afraid of self-driving. The self-driving cars already drive better than humans. And yet we want 99.9999999% efficacy from self-driving cars, even though humans are imperfect. And, I think in the US,
16 million deaths a year on the
yeah,
road because of human error.
exactly. And like 500 million car accidents, something ridiculous every year. And it would be a fraction of that with the level of technology we have in self-driving today. So it takes a long time for culture to adopt and these things to become acceptable, but it will happen. Eventually, it keeps demonstrating that it's better. I'm so optimistic on the potential for AI and I see it improving or changing our lives in ways that people don't necessarily anticipate. Like we haven't had a big humanoid robotics revolution, and I think we're on the verge of having one. So we invested in an extraordinary company called Figure.ai, Figure, and they create humanoid robots with like full dexterity, manual dexterity with their hands, and they can walk around. And they're currently active in like a production line in the BMW plant in Germany. And again, they're doing repetitive tasks of like moving something there from there and putting it, which is not a job a human should be doing, honestly. And the ambition is to replace humans in like last mile picking and packing warehouses for like the likes of Amazon. Again, like putting items in boxes, carrying the box to a FedEx or Amazon delivery truck, not jobs that are particularly well suited for humans. And the progress we're seeing there in terms of like each evolution of the robot in terms of efficacy, ability to learn, improve, etc., is such that I can see it really getting a point where a decade from now, from nothing today, we essentially will have billions of like humanoid robots running around. So, it's enabled by AI. So if AI wasn't as good as it was in terms of speech recognition, response, understanding of the world we're in, it would actually, that wouldn't work. So it's both a software and a hardware problem. The hardware problem is none to be scoffed at, but it is only enabled because AI has gotten so good.
You mentioned at the beginning you've invested in, I think you said 1,100 startups. And I would imagine that most of them are US based or North American based. We talked about robotics. You just mentioned BMW in Germany. Certainly, if I were thinking about robotics, I would think that Japan is at the forefront, cutting edge of that. I was wondering if you could react on that, and to what extent or how many of your investments are actually more extra US or at least more global.
So 50% of our investments are in the US, 50% are the rest of the world. Of the rest of the world, about 25% Western Europe and the Nordics, 10% Brazil and India, and 50% of the rest, 15% of the rest of the world.
And is that by design, by the way? Is that
No,
something you aim for?
no, it's completely bottoms up. We see deals, they come from, we have deal flows coming in globally, and we invest in the ones that we like. Now, the only things that are by design or intentionally avoiding Russia, China, and to a lesser extent Turkey, because the political decisions that they've made is leading to macroeconomic consequences and microeconomic consequences at the startup level that make it way harder to see whether or not a start or a company that you can invest in that would otherwise be extraordinarily successful may fail for reasons outside of its own fault. So I was obviously an early investor in Alibaba, did extraordinarily well there. I stopped investing in China after Jack Ma was disappeared, and I'm a big investor in Ant Financial, the payments company. But they were supposed to go in a 250 or $300 billion IPO, and that never happened. And who knows when, if ever, that will go public, and how Xi Jinping feels about it on any given day. Same thing. We're big investors in Russia until 2014. And so when Russia invaded Crimea, all the US VCs that were funding the Russian companies basically pulled out. And so all of our unicorn startups in the country basically were taken over for pennies on the dollar by oligarchs, and the entire category evaporated. And same thing in Turkey after Erdogan. The Western investors that are VCs are mostly in the West that were scaling the companies took flight and fright, and that destroyed many of those companies. So we've been way more careful, but other than that, no, it's totally bottoms up. And here's what's interesting. There's been a total democratization of startup creation. In 1998, you needed to be in Silicon Valley because you needed computer scientists from Stanford. That was the only place where you had the skill set. You needed the VCs from the Valley. That's the only place where there were VCs. And when you were building a startup, you were building your own data centers and computers and everything. Then came the open source revolution, so MySQL and PHP, which made things cheaper. Then came the AWS revolution, where you put everything in the cloud, so making things even cheaper. Then came the low code, no code revolution. Now with the AI revolution, you no longer need even to be a computer scientist. Your ability to build something, so it's cheaper, easier to build something than it's ever been. And so all of a sudden we're seeing non-traditional. So first it led to the explosion of secondary ecosystems. So you started seeing Paris and London and Berlin and New York and LA, et cetera, not just San Francisco. And then you're starting to see now an explosion in not only in other cities or countries like Indonesia and Vietnam and India, et cetera, but you're also seeing it in the secondary and tertiary cities, both in the core ecosystems and elsewhere, because you no longer need to be a computer scientist from Stanford. You could be a art history major and you have a vision for something, and you no longer need to find a nerdy friend who coded for you. You might be able to actually get it coded reasonably easily.
You wrote in one of your articles, timing is everything, about how AI is helping to democratize startups. That was something I was going to talk about. But I'm wondering, you just mentioned art history or something like that. To what extent do you think liberal arts is a viable area of study? Is that something you would sway your two kids to do or against?
So I always thought the point of a college education in the US, liberal arts or not, is actually intellectual curiosities. Pursue your passions and interests. But I wouldn't specialize, right? When I went to college, I studied, you name it, I studied it, like Peloponnesian War and Roman Empire and multivariable calculus and electrical engineering and molecular biology, and I majored in economics, and economics to me explained the way the world worked. Now, none of that effectively use today. I my the level of math I use relative to the level of math I achieved. I haven't run a regression, I think, in 20 years yet. I like the
Where's your HP
so
calculator?
so I'm not so sure. That said, would I encourage everyone to learn a program? Absolutely. Would I encourage everyone to understand basic accounting and finance and economics to understand how the world works? Absolutely. But would I specialize it in whatever art history? No. But is in knowing and understanding history, I think, interesting? Yeah. Some of the most interesting people I know and the most successful actually were philosophy majors. And Reid Hoffman at LinkedIn or Peter Thiel were both philosophy majors, and so I'd pursue my curiosity, and I would sprinkle in though things that are practical. So I would definitely not major in art history. I would definitely not major in diversity studies or whatever. So yeah, computer science, economics probably would be the two categories I'd be leaning towards. But the beauty of a major in the US is you need to take 4 courses a semester, and you have 4 years and 2 semesters per year. So that's 8 per year. So we're talking 32 classes, and your core major, I think, is like 8 or 12 advanced. So you have like 20 classes. And by the way, you don't need to limit yourself to 4 courses a semester. It's the same price whether you take 4 or 6 or 8. Now, probably need to drink a little less, party a little less if you want to take 8 a semester, but it is within your reach and your ability to study everything and anything. So I would, no, I would definitely study programming. I would definitely study economics and history, philosophy, all these things I think are fun and value add engineering as well.
So you basically subscribe to the American education at the university level, as I understand it.
Yes, but there are many majors that I do think lead down a wrong path, right? Like, so
Okay.
I would definitely not be studying art history because there's, I don't know how many art curators of the Met positions there are per year, but not very many, right? Like, so I would definitely not be studying music. I would not, I mean, the same way I wouldn't want to push someone to become a professional athlete. Um, I would, even though we're a family of racket enthusiasts. I actually would not want my son to try to be a professional tennis or paddle player because it leads to a monotonous life where your entire life from age 5 to whatever 35 is dictated by one thing. And so you're sacrificing everything on a altar of something that is okay. I think, I don't know. I just someone find it intellectually interesting. Is it fun? Is
Yeah.
it physically
I
challenging?
mean, and
And
it's
can you be
risky.
extraordinarily successful? Also, how many successful how how many people make a living out of tennis? Top 50 maybe, but how many people make a living out of being in business? Billions, or millions, or hundreds of millions, right? Like, so, but more importantly, I think just the life is just uninteresting, right? Like, you're doing the
That's
same
right.
thing day in and day out. I value curiosity, but depends on your interests.
No, I get that. All right, let's finish, Fabrice, talking about Fabrice AI. Let me put the context with which really struck me, which is that I believe that the future of AI in business will be about creating proprietary AI, proprietary data sets, proprietary learning algorithms, maybe on top of existing LLMs, at least at the beginning. But that's what I feel. And I feel most companies aren't there. Fabrice AI seems to me exactly in that vein for Fabrice Grinda Institute or Fabrice Grinda Inc. So tell us about the idea and what you've learned in trying to create Fabrice AI.
So the reason I decided to build Fabrice AI, understanding that the use cases are extraordinarily limited, it's really intellectual curiosity. It's like, when these companies were pitching me and they're telling me that they're building this extraordinary AI on private data models, like, how hard is that? How hard is it to build? How replicable is it? How much magic is there in the implementation of AI? And all these people that are building these copilots, is it just, I bring up the data, I pump it in the open AI API, and then we're done. And it's a couple of hours of work. And where is the nuance? And so it came out of intellectual curiosity. assuming that very few people would use it, because at the end of the day, I'm intentionally limiting the data. To your point, I do think the future of like AI in most enterprises is limiting it, or at least focusing it on your own proprietary data to create differentiated responses. So Fabrice AI is a digital representation of me based on the content I've uploaded, and I'll talk, and only that. So it's not open to the internet. So if I did not answer the question, it will just say it doesn't know. It's not open to Google and Wikipedia or ChatGPT writ large, because that was not the objective. The objective is replicate me. Now, the reason it's still interesting for me is I get a lot of inbound questions daily that are repetitive. The founders are always asking me the same thing. How do I come up with an idea? How do I validate my business idea? How do I write a deck? How do I pitch VCs? How do I approach VCs? When do I pitch VCs?
What are the biggest mistakes they make?
What are the biggest mistakes founders make? How do you find product market fit? If you're in a marketplace, how do you build liquidity in a marketplace? Or what are the biggest mistakes marketplace founders make? I mean, what are the current seed and Series A valuation and traction metric? I mean, I get the same questions over and over and over and over again. And I have written to some extent, answers to most of these, and I've addressed them by voice. So I'm like, okay, it'll be somewhat helpful for founders. And my blog really is a combination of like writing about things that interest me and also answering like, what are all the things I wish I knew when I was starting out and I was 23 that I now know? So it's kind of like sharing my knowledge and sending people to a repository of data, so I don't need to repeat myself on a day in, day out basis. So
Very fair.
That was really the basis of this. So it started about a year ago. And all I did at that time was basically upload all I have about 1,000 blog posts on the blog, and upload that content into the API for OpenAI. The thing is, the pricing of GPT 3.5 was like $1 a query, and GPT-3 was like 1 penny. So I put it in GPT-3, and the results were awful. Now, all I did, and at first, and that was just piping the data in, not even building an interface by which people can ask questions, because that actually requires creating a search or using a search engine on my end, and extracting the data and then piping it in real time. And the results were awful, and kind of no matter what I did, nothing worked. And the responses were, now I realized there were two problems. First problem was a data input problem, which is a lot of the knowledge that I share in my blog is actually not in text form, but actually is in PowerPoints, video interviews, podcasts, just audio interviews, and all those had to be transcribed. So massive exercise in transcription first, to transcribe all the video, audio, and PowerPoints. So I use like the Azure OCR to grab the text from the PDFs, nice, to convert it in text, to upload it. Then I had to take, but it did actually really good. It took a long time. It took a really good job. Like it uploaded the family tree to the point that I posted in one of the PDFs about the family in French. And so you can ask in Chinese a question of like, who is this person relative to this in our family history, and it answers. So just from reading the family tree, it's not written anywhere in the text. So it's actually gotten really good, but that's iteration 500. Converted all the videos and audio, but then it was not obvious to it who is the speaker. And so it would attribute, so if I'm interviewing someone, it would often attribute the answer of the other speaker to me, which is obviously completely wrong. And so I then had to delineate who is the speaker. And I use GPT to actually do all that.
But there's a lot of manual interference.
Oh my God, the amount of like, so I will split the job into two buckets. One is data cleaning and input, even though I'm using a lot of AI. So I would take a YouTube video or an MP3 file. I'd upload it in one of the many transcription programs. There's Otter.ai, there's GPT itself, etc. And I compared all of them to see the one that I like best. And that answer changed over time as to which one I like best as well. Then I realized that the transcriptions were terrible. meaning Fabrice could Fabrice, my name would sometimes be Fabrice, and it would get like CAC. It would not understand what it was, but I didn't want to go. I mean, a 1 or 2 hour podcast is like, I don't know, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 words. It's like editing books. So I decided, you know what? I'm not editing it. The only thing I'm doing is I'm writing a script where I'm making sure that it knows that speaker 1 is X person and speaker 2 is the Y person, and if there's more than that, and then it's tagged properly. Okay, so then I had all the audio, PowerPoint, PDF, and video content separated, and I uploaded it. But then obviously everything was uploaded at the date of the upload as opposed to the date it was originally recorded. So then I had to re-upload it, pointing at what are the dates so I understand context throughout time, such that putting a higher weight on more recent content than older content.
Mm-hmm. So
And
you're giving a weighting to all the content somehow.
yes, with more recent content, more highly weighted than older content, and certain content more weighted than others. And we're still getting most of the replies wrong. Even when I was using GPT-3.5. So then I'm like, okay, maybe I can use ChatGPT as a app store where, for free, by the way, you can actually just build an app, and paid subscribers of OpenAI, ChatGPT, can have access to the app store. So redid the same thing, upload all the content there. This way I didn't need to deal with everything else. And I'll talk about what the everything else is, because everything else is actually rather complex. And the results were better, but still not very good. And the limitations of that were that I could not embed it in my blog, and you need to be a paid subscriber of ChatGPT because it lives in the GPT store. And the results were, while better, were still kind of crappy. So then I'm like, okay, maybe as I'm piping the data, so I've created this database, so I've created this index of all of the content that is now nicely formatted, now nicely dated, and there's the OCR, there's everything's in text, everything's great. Maybe it's when I'm typing in the query and I'm sending the data to, maybe it's the problem is on my side. And it turns out that was true. So first I did, okay, what type of search, when I'm typing something in, because the database is actually held on our database. It's not you're sending the data to OpenAI to give an answer, but the queries are coming from you. So I first did a vector search on a llama index, and that didn't work. So then I used MongoDB, which worked better.
Kevin Ryan.
Yes, Kevin Ryan startup. Then we did a summary tree index. I mean, like, then I created a knowledge graph index. Then I tried different LLMs, and I tried Gemini. Then I did LangChain documents on Pinecone. I mean, you name it, I probably tried it. And what ultimately worked was, frankly, when they finally released GPT 4.0 or Model 4.0 and GPT and a product called GPT Assistance, which allows you to connect through the API more effectively using a vector database to refine the prompts. I finally got the results. But that's like 500 hours of work later. And this is something I do at night for fun, by the way. I mean, this is not my day job. This is like, oh, I'm a weekend or 3 hours to spare. Let's keep iterating on this. Where I got to the point where I was happy, which is kind of in July of this year. I still had like things to fix and incorrect answers, etc. And I decided then, okay, now I'm happy with the results. Let's go build a UX UI that looks like ChatGPT, and that both in mobile and web. So that took a little bit of time. And then I decided, okay, I want to have the ability for people to ask a question by voice and then get the text response. So then I needed to build a voice to text transcription product. So I tried 2 approaches. So actually there is a voice to text API offered by OpenAI called Whisper. The thing is, I call the API, I send the text, I send it there, they transcribe it, they send back the response, I then send it to my database, which then sends the data to GPT Assistance to get the results. And I was not happy with the latency. And so ultimately I decided, okay, this part I'm not sending a Whisper, I'm doing it on server here, but with the exact same UX UI as GPT, which is why I have a start recording and a stop recording. It's not like WhatsApp where you remove the finger and it stops recording. And yeah, release, and it's working shockingly well. Now again, it actually gets more usage than I expected. It's probably more, it gets as much traffic as the rest of my site. With really interesting questions. And people are asking like even very specific questions of like, what do you think of this funnel and this approach is vertical? And the answers are more nuanced and interesting than I expect them to be. I think one of my upcoming blog posts, I'm gonna like do a best, like, what are the top, the most interesting questions and answers I've seen, just because it's been more impressive than possible. Now, people also ask a lot of personal questions, which the AI doesn't have the answers to. So what I'm currently doing, but it's a lot of work, manual work that I'm the only person who can do, is I'm currently, so for my 50th birthday, people made a beautiful video tribute. So I'm actually transcribing the video tribute into text and uploading it in it is both in French and English, but it doesn't matter. You can upload it and it'll translate automatically. And I'll upload it so people can understand what my friends would think about me, who my friends are. Because right now, if you ask who my friends are, it actually answers things that are completely wrong because it's based on like posts where I took photos with friends from 30 years ago or 20 years ago. And the issue, of course, is there for every person who talks, there's no name in front. So I actually have to go through all the texts and add the name, the full name, and the relationship to me for each person. So I'm in the process of doing that as we speak. It is slow. So that's the next thing I'm going to upload. And then the next thing I'm going to upload is Fabrice AI. I'm trying a product called the HeyGen, and I'm scanning my face and voice to try to create an interactive version of me. I tried many other
The
products.
avatar.
Yeah, the avatar. So you can actually have a conversation with a digital version of me. Probably, I mean, I tried 4 or 5 of these products. They're all very expensive, like 10,000 a month or a year, setup fee, et cetera. The reason I'm choosing HeyGen is because it's like, I don't know, $10 for 30 for a lot. I don't remember the pricing, but like not a lot for a lot of minutes of interaction. I don't suspect there'll be that much usage. And so it's a variable cost, no setup fees, no minimums. It's like 20 or 30 bucks a month. And it's viable for someone doing it for fun with no real business model in the back end. And it is going to be a lot of coding, but I think it'll be fun. Now, again, lesson learned is I could probably wait for GPT-5 or GPT-6 and probably will include for free a way to digitize myself and not use HN. But you know what? The point is not to make it easy. It's like to see what's wide, who's doing wide, what is interesting. But it's definitely given me an appreciation for people building AI models out there that it's a lot harder to get things right than I expected.
Well, I mean, I love the fact that you're doing this. I mean, the fact is that you are experimenting, you're playing with it, you're doing hard work, really going down into nuts and bolts, and all this cleaning of the database, the tagging and everything. It seems like a monumental work. I'm wondering to what extent you would now say that your database is structured, or would you
Oh yeah.
still call it unstructured?
Oh no, it's fully structured. Well, here's what's interesting is I didn't need to tag it. So it's unstructured in the sense that it's not tagged much. There's maybe a category, but for sure
Prioritizations
the
somehow.
content. Oh yeah, but now the conversations is it's way more structured than ever, and it's also easier than ever to structure because now whenever I do one of these, for sure, I have it auto transcribed. I include the transcription in the blog post. So when I upload, so every new blog post I upload is now auto translated. First of all, and uploaded in all the and I think I picked like I don't remember, but like 26 languages or whatever, the top 26 or 30 languages in the world. So it's auto AI translated in all the languages. I upload all the translations, and I do all, if I do a video interview or whatever or a podcast, the text is I include the transcription in all the languages and upload it, and it's always added to automatically to the Fabrice AI repository. So it's way easier than it's ever been. And by the way, as I said, I don't proof it. So even though transcriptions are not perfect, I just make sure that the answers it gives from that are good by doing 2 or 3 QA questions. And for the most part, it actually works.
Well, if I could just put in front of you another friend of mine who launched a company called Flowsend.ai, FLOWSEND, which is particularly useful for podcasters because it really helps with this idea of identifying speakers. It also is available in multiple languages, and it provides a whole spew of relevant content to help propagate, socialize all the content that comes from it. Anyway, that's my
Yeah,
little,
that's really cool. I'll play with it. Look,
hey,
for instance, when you post this, I'll repost it on my blog,
there you
and
go.
we should definitely have
In 26
the
languages.
transcriptions and the speakers
Hey,
identified, et cetera, et cetera.
and so I'm just for people who are not familiar with you and your work. I went on it and I enjoyed very much playing around with it. I went and specifically went in what is a FJ Labs purpose, and then from there I say, well, what is purpose for you? Which I was just talking to the bot, right? I wasn't really thinking, Fabrice necessarily. And then all of a sudden the response came out, well, my purpose is to solve the world's problems in the 21st century, focusing on equality of opportunity, climate change, and the mental and physical well-being crisis through technology, especially marketplace and network effect businesses. So that is what your bot said. And I
Yeah, but
suspect
I would
you
say that that's true as well for me. So
exactly.
yeah,
So
Fabrice AI
beautiful.
agrees with Fabrice the individual, which is good.
Hey, it was a fact check. All right, listen, Fabrice, super. Thank you so much for coming back on. Great to riff with you. I really got a big buzz listening to you. How can people follow you? Where, obviously see your blog. What other links would you like to send them to?
Blog is probably the easiest. You can also follow me on LinkedIn, Fabrice Grinda there, and on Instagram if you want to see photos of my kids, basically, which is all I post, or my dog at all times. But yeah, my blog is really the best way to follow me.
Great. Hey, listen, Fabrice, à bientôt. Thanks very
À
much.
bientôt. Au revoir.